Welcome to the 2022 Kentucky Bourbon Festival and the first edition of the Bourbon 30 Talk Show. This is sponsored by Great Western Malting. Welcome to our, our fourth segment today, or the fifth? Bourbon 30 Talk Show. Well, and welcome to the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. Whoever hasn't sat down and had a seat and watched some of the fun interviews up here today. I'm Steve Coomes. I'm the Director of Content and Programming for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, which means I organize stuff like this and seminars inside the Spalding Hall, or the Brindiamo Penthouse Premium Education Room, as I'm told. So, speaking of sponsors, how's that for a shameless transition? We are grateful for Great West Malts. All right, it's been a long day. What does the sign say? Great Western Malting. Been a long day.
You're doing great, Steve.
Thanks so much for them. They pay for events like this and make it affordable for people to come and enjoy this, so we are more than happy to talk them up. I have with me today two people. Now, they thought it was weird to say earlier, two interviewers and one interviewee, or guest, as it were. But we are bookending Aaron Lawrence here, and on my far right is Paul Clarke. He is the editor. Is it editor-in-chief or just editor?
I am editor-in-chief. Yeah.
Of Imbibe magazine. Has anybody ever seen Imbibe?
Yeah.
Not only does it just touch on whiskey, it visits all spirits. It visits coffee. It visits beer. It visits wine.
If it's liquid, we do it. And you can drink it.
And you can drink it. That's the key qualifier.
I realized I needed to add a caveat there. So
I'm thinking turpentine. Do we get
True
there?
man of leisure, right?
True man of leisure, that's right. But in the middle is a good buddy of mine, too, Aaron Lawrence from Blantons. Actually, Age International. That's who you represent. Blantons.
There you go. Thanks for the shout out.
And his lovely wife, Meredith, who also works for Blantons, is here, too. So y'all can start hating on them now, the fact that you can't get their product anywhere, right?
We're making more than ever, I promise, for sure.
And in 5 to 7 years or 8 years, whatever, we'll know about that, right?
Well, it just depends on the amount of thirsty people out there, right?
I think there's quite a few. Some are in this crowd.
And it seems like every year that number grows a little bit, which is great. And certainly the festival like this helps to grow those numbers, and that's what we're all after.
Well, of course, we have to talk about the phenomena that it's become. I mean, how long ago was it that Blanton's was affordable and reachable? Now, you have an MSRP that might say it is affordable, but it never sells for that.
No, the thing is, being the world's first single barrel bourbon, when Elmer T. Lee created Blanton's back in 1984, I don't think that anybody ever imagined that it would be what it was today, and so it was never intended to be a mass-produced product. Let's say, and I think for a long time it didn't sell, and now all of a sudden the secret's out of the bag, and it's excellent whiskey. The quality process, the selection process, and everything that they do at Buffalo Trace to ensure that continuity from barrel to barrel is what makes it so special. But the biggest challenge for us is just rolling out enough barrels quick enough. And every year it seems like we break a new record for how much we're able to produce. And then we're met with even more fans out there that, hey, have you heard of Blanton's? Hey, I got to, let you try this bourbon with the horse on top, And so as the demand grows, certainly we try our best to keep up, but it's a slow process. It's a hard, painstaking way of making whiskey.
Paul, what's it like on the West Coast? Here people are just constantly looking for it. They're waiting at stores. They're trying to develop relationships with liquor purveyors, and it seems like there's a constant frustration that they can't find it. Is it like that on the West Coast as well?
Absolutely. So I live in Seattle, and our magazine is based in Portland, Oregon, and a lot of our work is from Washington to California as well as nationally. But we look at a lot of stuff that's going on the West Coast, and absolutely, we're very much a whiskey drinking kind of people. We're very much a bourbon drinking kind of people, and we drink Blantons when we can find it, and which is not all that often, as you've
Not
noticed.
as often as anyone would want.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the demand is definitely there, and I think it's the kind of thing where we have some great whiskey bars on the West Coast. As I said, I live in Seattle, a few blocks from Cannon, one of the great whiskey bars in the United States. Fantastic whiskey bars in Portland, Oregon. Multnomah Whiskey Society and Hardwater in San Francisco, and all of these places. They kind of drive this interest that's been going on, the demand for great bourbon and for stuff like Blantons. It's just nonstop.
Our people is just go ahead, Aaron.
I was just going to say, I started with Blantons in 2017. I've been in the wine and spirits industry for over a decade now, and there has definitely been a change in that people are after quality, and the quantity, part of the equation is always afterwards. But the first thing is I want to drink something that's delicious. I want to drink something that's objectively top-notch, and so brands like Blantons have been in a good seat to enjoy that change, but also we talk about this all the time in the office. It's like we have good problems to have, but they're still problems, and we recognize that it's frustrating, and so patience is certainly one of those things that when we're waiting for whiskey to come of age is, the paramount thing.
Right.
Is it a struggle to see prices go so high on the secondary market that it's having the backlash and influencing the retail market, the legal market, as it were?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that part of the reason that we've tried to maintain the MSRP at $65, $70 is because truly we want Blantons to be an affordable luxury. We want it to be something that is accessible to everyone, but the demand has kind of made that really tricky for us. And so finding that balancing act of what the market or the aftermarket is demanding a certain price versus what we're saying we want this to be for. There's always a little bit of a challenge there.
Right. And Steve, you had mentioned, you had asked me, what's it like on the West Coast for this? And we'd like to think of this as, Kentucky is obviously bourbon country, and there's a lot of demand for bourbon here. There's a lot of demand for bourbon on the West Coast, as I was saying. But that demand doesn't end at the oceans, doesn't end at the U.S. border. And I'm kind of curious, what kinds of pockets around the world do you see of particular demand for great bourbon
question.
and demand for Blantons?
Yeah, it got its legs overseas.
Yeah,
it really did.
It truly did. And I think, the Blanton story is a very unique story that a lot of other brands, can't really tell the same tale in that from basically 1984 to, let's say, 1994, the first 10 years of Blanton's history, sales were at all-time lows. It was 3 times higher than any other product out there. And it just, quite frankly, didn't sell here in the U.S. And so we had to look abroad to other partners to kind of keep that single barrel program alive, to keep Elmer T. Lee's vision alive. And so what we have now is a truly global bourbon brand, a truly global Kentucky bourbon brand. And to answer your question, Paul, I think, one of the markets that we've been in for the longest time that's been probably I would argue, if not the most, one of the most influential in terms of the Blanton story is the French market. Mm-hmm. So in France, we started selling there in the mid-90s, again, when it wasn't selling here at home. And I think the French palate with their cognacs, Armagnacs, and, Calvados brandies, it's a barrel-aged spirit that has a sweeter profile. And so I think it was an easy transition for the French palate. Uh-huh. But Blantons is a household name in France, and the only complaint that I get there is the same one that I get here is, where can I find it and why can't I get more, But yeah, I think one of the things about Blantons that appeals to a lot of aftermarket collectors and fans out there is that it truly is a global whiskey. I mean, you can travel all over the world and have a conversation with somebody about Blantons. And in that way, it kind of brings us all together in a way that brings us all together. Thank you. You know, I've heard Harlan maybe making some appearances throughout the weekend, but thank you. And in case you guys didn't hear, he said best bourbon in the state of Kentucky. Thank you. Appreciate your kind words.
Anybody else want to come up and give a personal testimony? That was a first.
As a true man of his convictions.
Wow. So let's talk about the packaging. I mean, 'cause so many people seem fascinated with that, and it is cool. Was that Elmer's vision, or did the team come into that, or did he just create the whiskey?
Yeah, that's a great question, Stephen. I love talking about the early days, and you know, unfortunately, so much has been lost to history. They weren't the best at keeping records in the late 80s and early 90s, but my understanding, and a lot of this I've got anecdotally from Freddie Johnson, Bourbon Hall of Fame member, but there you go, yep, amen. And so Freddie said Elmer wanted that bottle to look like a barrel because he was bringing the world's first single barrel into the world. And then when they were looking at it, you know, they had kind of a similar stopper as, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the Rock Hill Farms bottle,
Yep.
where it's got the glass decanter kind of look on
Right.
top. So they were playing around with that idea, and it was Elmer that said, this just isn't right. We need something else. And somewhere along the line, somebody threw in, well, what about a horse and jockey? And so some molds were created, and, you know, by trial and error process, that iconic horse and jockey stopper on the round bottle that looks like, you know, in Elmer's thoughts, at least as close to a barrel as he could get. And in that way, we really brought in both sides of Kentucky's heritage. You bring the whiskey making culture into it, as well as the horse racing culture. And as many of us, you know, Kentuckians know, the two go hand in hand, right? So when they would sell the
Just
bourbon,
not with rider and saddle. That's not a good
Yeah,
idea.
exactly.
Or rider and horse. Long day.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you, I'm sure you've seen those crowds at the distillery, you know, at the gift shop, and they're lining up. I mean, they're looking for the letter. They're looking for the
Specific letter.
stride. They want to fill out their eight bottle collection.
You have the bourbon collectors, and you have the bourbon collectors who are also the stopper collectors. I was at a dinner party a couple of weeks ago and celebrated there with non-industry people, not really bourbon people. They had a bottle of Blantons in the house, and they weren't big bourbon fans, but they knew about the horse.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know, I know I have to get more. Like, well, okay, that's going to be an issue, but yeah, keep
We'll
looking
try.
around, and you can round out that collection of
I mean,
horses.
what other brand has a stake at eBay? You know, just selling the bottle tops. I mean, that's just amazing.
Exactly. It is
The
quite
bottle
amazing.
at the tops.
So what's interesting about the letters is that didn't start until 1999, actually. So at the beginning, there was one horse and jockey. And then, you know, like so many good stories in bourbon's history, there was a lot of really great minds involved thinking about something over, you know, a long period of time. And eventually, that collective mind came through and said, hey, what if we spelled out Blantons with this, and then what if we took it a step further and made the whole horse race? And there's nothing more frustrating than having 7 letters and getting a bottle of Blantons. And of course, you know, you buy it because it's Blantons and it's there, and you may not see it again for another 6 months. But looking for that last letter of the collection is so challenging, for sure.
How influential has, or I should say, have all of these new iterations, you know, Blanton's Gold, Blanton's from the Japanese market, what's it, an 80 proof, Blanton's Black, the straight from the barrel. I mean, that surely has elevated the brand in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I think it has, and I mean, particularly speaking to Blanton's Gold and Blanton's Straight from the Barrel. So that was one of the things that I was able and fortunate enough to be in the process and on the team to bring Blanton's Gold and Straight from the Barrel to the U.S. in 2020. Granted, the amount of barrels that are available are limited, and we're growing that slowly, but it's amazing, the difference between Blanton's original 93 proof, Blanton's Gold, and Blanton's Straight from the Barrel. Aside from the fact that they're all different barrels, right? Because they're all single barrels, is really just a difference in proof. And man, does that change the profile of the whiskey. And Blanton's Gold at 103 proof almost doesn't. If you taste that next to a 93 proof, it's hard to tell which one has more alcohol and which doesn't, because that harmony of flavors just comes together.
Right.
And there's just that added layer of complexity that a little bit more alcohol brings to the table. And then, of course, for the real serious bourbon drinkers out there, Blanton Straight from the Barrel is the purest expression of that single barrel offering. I mean, that's what Harlan and his team are tasting, and they run essentially a mesh screen through it, but it's what's in the barrel is what's in the bottle. And so that's special for its own reasons as well.
Right. And I think, one of the things about Blantons, especially as we see, how dynamic the whiskey world has gotten, how big the whiskey world has gotten in recent years, it provides, a sense of kind of reliability and durability in the identity. But still, it's a very dynamic world. So how cautious or how ambitious do you see the future in terms of future ventures like this with Blantons, whether on proof or anything else?
Yeah, well,
I mean, we're not going to get Blanton's peach anytime soon.
Blanton's fire.
No flavored Blantons. I'd personally love to see a Blanton dry sometime. I don't know, but
okay. See,
this is
now.
just me pipe dreaming. There's nothing in the works. Let it be very clear. No, I think.
Is that true, Meredith? Nothing in the works.
Nothing in the works. It's a great question. One of the things that is the most challenging about our single barrel program is maintaining consistency or a profile barrel after barrel, year after year. And I think that alone has hindered a lot of the desire to grow too fast. Because really and truly, we talk about the packaging, but at the end of the day, the reason people go to such great lengths to find a bottle of Blanton's is not because there's a horse on stop. It's because the whiskey inside the bottle is delicious time and time again. And that is complete credit to the Buffalo Trace Distillery and their quality process and how much of a priority that they make that. So every single barrel of Blanton's is tasted by a trained quality panel of distillery employees, and they're always tasting those barrels against a previously bottled version of Blanton's so that profile never varies. Now, of course, with single barrel offerings, you're going to have slight nuances that is part of the fun.
Standard deviation.
Standard deviation, but at least that Blanton's profile is always there. And the fact that it's remained there since 1984, that's almost 40 years now. That's what makes Blanton's a true icon of bourbon history.
Well, now, when you say that it's being tasted against a previous bottling of Blanton's, are we looking at like a recent bottling or like a distant bottling? Because you could see, like a kind of incremental shift over the
that it might
years.
drift a little bit.
Yeah, like a river shifting its course gradually.
So my understanding is that the archive is very comprehensive, and that the samples are pulled at random. So it might be a bottle from the 90s, it might be from 2000, it might be from last month.
Okay.
But it's always a previously bottled version, and they're tasting these every single day. So there's always that continuity of approach.
Right. Excellent.
Something else. So, which of all the iterations, which is your favorite?
I have to go with the 93 proof original. From a taste standpoint, it is very approachable. It's not too high on the ABV side. That it's a very easygoing drink. It's a
Absolutely.
wonderful sipper, but it also makes a great Manhattan. I probably wouldn't make peach martini with it, but certain cocktails I think that are more
would be the
booze
best
forward.
damn peach martini in your entire life.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking through some of the old marketing material from the 90s when the brand was kind of not doing so well, and I found this sheet of old cocktails, and it was just like, what were we thinking? You know, it was like a Ranger mojito with like, it was just,
Oh my!
they were off the wall. They will never be published. That document may or may not have been shredded.
But it also speaks to how desperate they were to sell whiskey back.
Yeah, they were so desperate. And that's the part of the story that now a lot of people are quick to forget, is that it took a long time to get to where we are now. And we always want to remain humble to our history and also to try to be forward thinking and, think about what's next. I think for the time being, going back to that question about anything on the pipeline, if we can focus on the barrels that we have to make more 93 proof available, more gold and more straight for the barrel available, then I think we're doing what everybody wants us to do. And definitely the plan is to stay on that path. The other thing that I'll add to why 93 proof is my favorite is because when I was in college and in grad school, whenever I would come home, my dad, before I even thought I would ever work for such a great brand such as Blanton's, the bottle that Dad would always bring out was Blanton's, and that was his favorite. And so for me, the 93 proof just has that sentimental appeal too.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I think that's the beauty of bourbon, and certainly probably Paul what you guys do with the Imbibe magazine, but let's be honest, whiskey brings people together. It's not the main event. It's on the sidelines, and those human connections that we can make and those sentimental moments, that's what keeps coming back for more. That's why we do what we do, for sure.
And I think, we talk about the whiskey and kind of the heritage there, but I think that connection that you're talking about is such a part of it because, everybody has their own story now about Blantons, either how you had it in abundance or how you could never get it or how you're collecting the horses or the packaging or what it is that you like about it. But the point of it is you're talking about Blantons and you're having a conversation, and that's a launch pad for so many other things.
Exactly. Yeah, well said.
I think it's cool that it's 93. It's not 94, not 92. And we get to speak to a lot of distillers who talk about that. Well, 92.4 was the one. People really can get down to that tenth of a point. It shows the effort that's put into it to make it taste that good.
There's a lot of thought, and I
target
think,
it, yeah.
Elmer T. Lee should get all the credit for 93 proof. I mean,
did you get to know him, by the way?
I never got the chance to meet him personally, but some folks in our office that are now retired had a lot of great encounters with him, and I've been fortunate enough to be close enough to his legacy that I've heard a lot of really, really touching stories, and by all accounts, I've always heard him to be just one of those great men that are more humble than anything else, that you'd never know it unless somebody behind the scenes told you that's who that was. And I think that's really cool. And nobody loved Kentucky bourbon more than Elmer T. Lee.
That's cool. And even his namesake bourbon, I'll see it for $500 a bottle.
Which is great whiskey. That's absolutely great whiskey. Yeah.
93 proof. Correct?
No, it's a little higher than that. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. Sure, yeah, we can talk about the non-chill filtered aspect. So from a production standpoint, when you're making single barrel bourbons, there's a lot of challenges on the control side of things. And that's why everybody thought that Elmer was crazy when he introduced the program back in the day, because how can you do this and have a quality product time and time again? So interesting enough, the straight from the barrel is not chill filtered, actually. So I think it was Jim Murray that I'm quoting here, and I apologize to Jim, but if I misquote him. But straight from the barrel, uncut, unfiltered, unbelievable, right? And so the idea with the chill filtering is that you add a certain amount of stability to the whiskey from just a chemical solution standpoint. Nobody wants hazy whiskey, and we've all had that bottle on our shelf that's been there maybe a little bit too long, been open a little bit too long, and it gets a little cloudy in the bottle. And so what the chill filtering does is it makes it a lot harder for that to happen. not to say that that's impossible for that not to happen, but at 93 proof and 103 proof, the makers feel like it's still too low of a proof to take that gamble, and we don't want to take any risks. So the chill filtering was a part of the process from the beginning, just to ensure that we're putting the best product out there that we can. And then the difference on the straight from the barrel at a higher proof is the alcohol kind of acts as a police officer a little bit for the whiskey, and so all of the bad stuff that makes it go out of solution, the high ABV kind of regulates that, and you don't have as much of a concern there.
Excellent. Great question.
So before I worked at Blantons, I was actually a winemaker, and so that's why I know a lot of these kind of more production type questions from a quality standpoint, but it's been an interesting path.
Well, this has been fantastic to catch up with you, my friend.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming.
And thanks to all the fans out there for sure. Your patience is amazing. I promise you we're making more. Keep drinking the good stuff. And yeah, there's a barrel out there with your name on it.
Awesome. Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Paul.
Have a great festival, everyone.